with everything going around with the coronavirus, I figured I'd do a small video. At least that's what I promised. So let's talk viruses. Okay, so first, what are viruses? We'll compare it to bacteria or a human cell. This is a sign for a cell. So we compare the virus. So let's take this here. So red will be the virus. Okay, where a bacteria or a human cell have a metabolism, viruses don't have any. They can't reproduce by themselves, not like the bacteria. They can't produce any energy. They can't produce or have a respiratory system. They cannot run, fly, or swim, so they cannot attack you. Okay, we can see a lot of things or weird things on Facebook or on internet. So it's not like a virus is just hanging around, flying somewhere, and then just decide to attack you and just create this big illness. So they're actually non-active. They don't do nothing. They just stay there like a piece of rock. So they can't run, and size are pretty small compared to a human cell or a bacteria. It's very, very small. Sorry. So what I'll do here, I'll draw like a cell or a bacteria, and I'll draw here herpes virus. Just so you can compare the size, well, about. So in the cell you have a nucleus where you have the RNA and DNA. So the genetic code of the particular cell. And this cell will use, I don't know, glucose, like sugar. We'll use amino acid, fatty acid as a fuel source. And then she will produce, or it will produce, an enzyme. Could be like some probiotics, produce some neurotransmitter, and they burn energy, they use oxygen, and so on. Well, there are some not using oxygen, but that's for another video. Okay, so if I am a virus, the only thing I am is this part here. So this virus is only a RNA or a DNA strain. Let's say this is the computer. So they need to of this big production company. So they go there, they infect, like they will infect, the virus infect your computer. So they go here, they run their own program, and then they can produce what? They produce other RNA or DNA viruses. But we'll talk about reproduction later on. But this is just to mention the difference here between bacteria and viruses. So it's a big difference. It has nothing to do with one with the other. So let's continue. Okay, let's talk about good or bad viruses. So are they only bad, like doing only infection and create disease or illnesses? Or are there some, can we find some good viruses? Okay, first thing we know now is that bacteria are everywhere. Okay, so we know we have a gut flora, we know we have bacteria, good bacteria on the skin. So we know bacteria are everywhere, and we know that some are very good, like probiotics are very good for us. Some are very bad, can cause infection and so on. But viruses are everywhere as well. So you have viruses everywhere. They dated the viruses up to 450 million years ago, so before the dinosaurs era. So when everything was living in the ocean. So they trace it back to the water. Okay, what's this 1 million here? So 1 million is the quantity of viruses in 1 teaspoon of ocean water. So if you go and swim in the ocean and then, have a lot of water in your mouth, let's be sure that you just drank a lot of viruses. There are over, I think the real number, I think they're saying it's about 195,000 variety of populations of viruses in the ocean. So imagine everywhere on Earth, like if you measure not only the ocean, but everywhere. So you can find a lot of different viruses. Here, microbiome is for bacteria in the gut, but we also have a virome, like this. So virome are necessary in your gut. Like the microbiome, like the gut flora is necessary for your gut, for your the digestion and the integrity of the gut lining. So you need as well a lot of viruses to help out. They did studies, I may put it here somewhere, the study about rats, where a germ-free rat, where they just clean up the whole intestine or the gut, and when you get rid of all the bacteria in the gut, you just create issues or illness or damage to the gut. When you reintroduce the virome or viruses, then you have this protective effect on the gut. So it's really helpful, and they help in one other way as well. So there's bacteriophage viruses. So this is a bacteria. Let's say you have a bad bacteria of some sort going in your gut. So you can have these bacteriophages. They look a bit like this. Anyway, trust me. I'm not super good, but at least you understand. So they can attack these bacteria and just kill them. So they actually can help you. So if bacteria or viruses are, well, both. Bacteria are not only bad or only good. They're both. It could be good, could be bad. Viruses is the same thing. So they can be good, they could be bad. Okay, I started this video saying that the viruses cannot reproduce, but we'll talk about reproduction. So they cannot by themselves reproduce, but they can use cells to replicate. So let's take bacteria, because everyone have heard about it at high school. So if you have, let's say even a human cell or bacteria, so they will double up. Okay, that's the reproduction. They just separate and then create two other cells. I'll just draw in another one here. So every time you go from 1, 2, 4, and the next one will be 8, obviously. So if you do a graph where you see the growth rate or the reproduction rate, you'll see it goes like this. Okay, viruses, it's much different. So remember, we had the cell, and then you have, let's take the coronavirus. It looks a bit like this, with some heads like this. So why the coronavirus? Because it looks like a crown. So the virus will come here, and this will attach to the cell if the cells accept it. So for instance, if you have influenza virus, they will attach more to the lungs cells. So if you eat them and they go into the gut, like, they won't attack the gut. So the virus needs to find its host or the cell that will accept this virus, this particular virus. So it will have this receptor so they can connect. So some medication, they work on here so that they cannot attach to the cell. That's why it's protective, but we won't talk about this for now. So basically, they use either the nucleus or some part of the cell to reproduce, and then you have a lot of viruses. Produce, up to a point, it will create apoptosis or the cell death. So it will break up the cell, and then all the viruses will get out and then attack another other cells and then replicate and so on. So if you do the graphs like this of the virus reproduction, it will look something like this. So here we call it the eclipse period. Eclipse. So basically it's this time where it can reproduce here. So you don't actually see viruses, or there's a part that, before the reproduction, and then it's a steep increase instead of constant increase. So it's not like the incubation period that we'll talk just in the next part, but in two parts. But the eclipse is just a time where nothing is really happening. It depends on the virus. It depends on the way it replicate, and then you have this acceleration of the reproduction. Okay, last part of this video with incubation and transmission. So basically, the incubation period is not like the eclipse period that we saw earlier. So it's the time before getting any symptoms. And then you have the spread of the disease. So the incubation period is this part here. In the case of the coronavirus, it's like in between 1 and 14 days. The thing is, it's not all viruses that can be transmitted during this phase. So this is the incubation phase. It's really before the symptoms. So with the bad thing about the coronavirus is that you can spread it without knowing that you're actually having it. So if, let's say, your symptoms begins at 6 days, and you've been infected here, then you see someone here, and you can be someone that infect that person because of you're during this incubation period. So one thing we need to consider or understand for the transmission is the R naught. It's the let's say the pace or the rate of the transmission. So let's take, for example, R naught of 1. It's someone that would this or transmit the virus to one person, and this one would transmit it to one person, and so on. So that would give 1. For coronavirus, it's around 3. That means 1 will give it to 3 person. This one will give it to 3 person. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9, 3, 1. So the next one would be 27, and so on. So if you see the graph of the transmission, it will look like this. So as you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 9, 27. So you go exponential. That's why it's important to consider the isolation, or to actually do it. The idea is that if you have Paul here and Paul is on isolation, then you stop these 3 from, or you reduce the chance of giving it to 3 other person, and you know here it's 9 person, and you know here it's 27 person. So you're reducing all this spread. So it's not just that one person. It's important because you're protecting all these guys here. So if we look here, so that means it would be 1 and going to 2, and then if you have few guys here doing isolation, and then you'll be at 4 here. So what you're doing, you're actually reducing this curve here. That's why it's important. This part is important. So you're somewhat reducing the 3 here to 2, but the virus keeps on like the R naught will stay 3, but it will look like a 2. The thing is that if Paul decides to go to a party and see a lot of people, and he just got infected, he's in his incubation period, so he will still give it to 3. So it's always the R naught doesn't change. So it will still potentially can give it to 3% and start another things like that. This is the reason why we need isolation. So hope it's a little bit more clear, but I'll explain something else. Let's take this Paul again. That's his mouth. Maybe high here. So he's talking, so you don't need to actually cough or sneeze. You can just talk and spread it with the mucus. So let's say he's infected, so he's spreading the disease because he's coughing. But if the virus needs a lot of, let's say, information, or it needs a lot of, it's very dense, once he spit it, it will go fast on the ground. So maybe it will be 1 meter or 3 feet, or maybe it's lighter, so it can throw it more, and maybe it's 2 meters or 6 feet. So depending on the type of virus, and you have some viruses that are very, very small, so that you can spread them up to even 50 meter or 150 feet. So you can spread them pretty far away. So the thing with the coronavirus, as you can imagine, it's in this zone. That's why some are saying 1 meter, some are saying 1.5 meter, or some are saying 2 meters. Here we're saying 2 meters. It's just to be safe. But now you understand why it's important. So it's really to make sure the other person is here, so it's not in the line of sight of the virus or this line of transmission. So it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward, not hard to understand, but hopefully it gives you an idea. So it's it's not just random rules that the government or the World Health Organization are doing. It's not arbitrary, putting 1 meter, 2 meter, because they know the distance we need to cover, so that people don't get, so that the virus don't get transmitted. In conclusion, pretty straightforward information, I guess. Hopefully those of you who are afraid or were afraid of viruses, now you know that viruses can be very beneficial for our health. And if you were not fearful enough of viruses, and especially that coronavirus, now you understand why we need to stop the spread, so that it doesn't cover a lot or infect a lot of persons, to reduce that curve, to help out with the health system. And you understand why we need to keep our distances to make sure we're not spreading this disease and virus. So hope you like my explanation on this whiteboard. Hopefully I'll see you around in the next video. Bye bye.